They say a man can borrow money, but he cannot borrow morning. Yet some men try to take tomorrow and spend it like wine today, and that attempt tells a story, beginning with a single step. What he felt as he walked into town was hunger for small, bright things, and the first bargain would come with a smile that hid a cost that time keeps. The next choice lay before him. He was called a soldier, though the wars he had fought were less remembered than the songs he sang to keep nights warm. His pockets were hollow and his manners were pleasant, and where he walked, children followed the sound of laughter more than fear. He wanted feasts, company, and the bright things that felt like proof of life. And so he listened when a silver-tongued lender offered him gold for promises etched into tomorrow, and the bargain seemed like a doorway he had earned. The lender did not hand gold without terms. It was told that he kept an hourglass on his shelf and measured promises in grains of sand, and the soldier signed with a flourish that pledged not only coin, but seasons yet to come. He took the coin, and that night ate as if the world had no end. But each bite was borrowed, and each laugh owed a measure of days he did not yet own, the debt settled in promises that time will later collect. That night the soldier adorned himself with borrowed joy, wine like sunlight, a fire that ate the cold, and the company of voices that sang until the roof felt like it might lift. He believed wealth had changed his fate. Yet when dawn washed over the roofs, the pouch was lighter and the ledger heavier in ways he could not see, and the taste of the feast already smelled of the coming tally, and so the village watched as he walked away, richer for a moment, poorer for the seasons decanted ahead. Time moved as it must, indifferent to the soldier's laughter, and the first harvest season came with a quieter ledger and fewer hands to share the work, for a promise had been written that claimed a portion of what would have fed his own table. He found his fields lighter and his hearth smaller, and he felt an ache that was not hunger, but the slow tightening of a rope measured in unpaid mornings. The next strain would show itself in harder weather. The lender's ledger did not forgive. Some say his ink tasted of winter, that he wrote interest with a steady hand and watched seasons compound like snow against a door, gathering until the weight became an open burden. The soldier paid with coin, then with grain, then with favors that hollowed his days one by one, and each payment bought a little breath but reduced his store of future mornings, and neighbors began to speak in quiet circles about the cost of being liked for borrowed things. Pride kept him from speaking plainly. He would not say that he had borrowed, for to admit debt felt like confession, and so he borrowed again when the road offered new pleasures and when the company asked for more. He believed his fortune would turn in time, that a brave choice, a winning campaign, or a favor returned would free him from the hourglass, and he continued to spend tomorrow like coin he had somehow earned, but compounding weights for no hope. Neighbors whispered like the wind through the eaves, "He borrows tomorrow's bread to feed today's joys," and that whispered judgment settled into the soldier's ears, but did not root him to a new path. He kept his laughter for strangers and his silence for those who loved him, convincing himself that fortune would arrive soon enough to repay what he had taken, and the night closed with the hourglass still turning. When winter came, the lender's visits increased like the tapping of an unseen knuckle at the door, and he took more than coin. He asked for promises sealed with bonds, and for the names of heirs to whom the future might be promised. The soldier felt the knock as a cold note, and realized too late that the measure of his borrowing had been written into the lives of those he loved, and his heart, which had once been light, now carried a cold weight that made even sleep uneasy, and a decision approached. Faced with the choice to stop or to borrow more to cover what was owed, he chose the easier path. Many choose when nights are long. More borrowing to patch the present and buy time for a hoped-for turn of fate. He believed in one last bright gamble, in a final feast or a final favor, and so he took another pledging of seasons, thinking the road would circle back to him richer and free. Yet roads do not always return the traveler to where he started. When the call came for men to march beyond the hills, for reasons that were half duty and half the promise of coin, he went, thinking service would mend his ledger and honor would buy time back from the lender. On the field he fought as a man can who has nothing left to lose, and he chose courage to cover debts he had chosen in lighter light. Fate, however, has its own currency, and what he paid there would not return to the hands he wanted to protect. The next hour would decide more than a single life. Some say the soldier fell beneath a sky so clear it seemed cruel, and that when the dust settled there was no coin left in his pouch and no seasons to trade. While those who survived returned with pockets full of promises the dead could not honor. His house stood empty of laughter, and the ledger at the lender's table grew, with new entries that named children and crops he would not see. And the hourglass in the lender's shop gleamed with the sand of other men's borrowed mornings, and the village felt a quiet that was almost a verdict. When the soldier did not return, the lender walked to the cottage and read from the ledger with a voice as steady as law, and he placed the debt upon the shoulders of those whose names had been written in ink, children who had never tasted the feasts their father had bought. The village watched as fields that might have fed a family were pledged, and they learned in that slow, heavy way that debts do not vanish with a life. They transfer their weight to the mornings of others, and a lesson was forming in the hush. Some in the village wanted to repay at any cost, to pluck grains from winter stores and sell the last of the sheep, while others said it would be better to teach the children to keep their mornings and to refuse a pact that cost so much of future peace. They argued under the church eaves and around kitchen fires, and through their arguments a small wisdom took shape, that borrowed pleasures must be weighed against who must bear the payment when the borrower is no longer there, and a quiet plan emerged. An elder who kept a small wooden clockmaker's bench and who had watched seasons like a silent student stood and spoke of time as a trust, saying, "We are given mornings to steward, not to squander on pleasures that leave our children only ledgers." Her words fell like humble stones into the discussion, and the villagers began to see their own choices reflected in the soldier's folly, as if his life had been both warning and map, and a decision settled into practice. They repaid what they could, restructured the rest, and taught the children not the soldier's taste for glitter, but a careful way to count mornings, to save a portion of each day as if it were seed for another spring. And in that new practice the village repaired more than stores, they repaired the future. The soldier's story became a parable told at hearths, a caution of borrowed time, a reminder that pleasures paid from tomorrow might leave those we love holding empty hands. And from that telling came a new quiet resolve. The parable closes, and these lessons stand clear. Keep your mornings, spend with care, and never pledge the dawn of those you love.